Well, sorry to report the 6-game winning streak for the Dallas Cowboys is over, and surprisingly at the hands of the Denver Broncos. Let's get into it with Nick Eatman, a guy who watches this team close. He's covered the Cowboys the last couple decades. I am Adam Kaufman, and Nick, there's a lot to unpack here, obviously, as it relates to this loss. I mean, it was 30-0 in Dallas, with Denver leading that game in the fourth quarter before a couple of touchdowns that, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, didn't really matter there in the last handful of minutes. How do you explain what went down here?
It was in Dallas because it didn't sound like it. It sounded like it was Denver. It didn't look like it either. Very orangey look to the stadium. But obviously, you know, what happened was one team dominated the other. And, you know, the snowball effect, I think, that happened early in the game. I thought it was like when you're playing Madden against the computer and you're like, I'm not kicking a field goal. I'm just going to go for it. And then I'll stop them. And if I don't stop them, then I'll score the next time. And if we don't score, then we'll just score the next time. And it didn't happen. It just kept snowballing. And before you look up, you know, it's probably pissing off the Broncos. Like, oh, okay, you guys can think you can just do whatever you want. And it just didn't work. One thing led to another and to another and to another, and they couldn't. When you don't run, block, tackle, hit, block a punt, when you can't do anything right, it's not going to be your day.
No excuses out of Dak Prescott after that game. As he said, I think the quote was, we just got whooped. But, you know, this guy hadn't played in a few weeks, obviously, because of the calf injury, that calf strain. You know, there were some questions going into the game as to whether he would play. As we know, he did. He wasn't at his finest by any means. But, you know, how much do you think that the layoff, the injury, all of it played into this, or is it just, hey, the tough game?
I think there's a lot of things involved, and there are no excuses, and especially in his case, and any quarterback really. But you know, when you get paid what you get paid, you know, everybody knows it, and it's been well documented. You go out and you do your job. But I think if you were to say like what was the reason, I think it's a little bit of everything. Probably 25% this, and this. 25% the rust. Don't discredit what Denver did. I mean, the Broncos had a really nice job of the scheme. I also think the game got away from them early on. And then also, you know, their receivers were banged up all week long. And Amari didn't practice much at all. CD did not practice. And so it was kind of they just looked out of sync as well. So, you know, which one, you know, is the bigger problem? I think it just all led to it was a perfect storm or an imperfect storm in this case, and just led to that game. I don't think it's one that you hit the panic button yet, but if they don't come out and take care of business against Atlanta, then I think there's some real problems. But right now, you look at it as one game with a lot of odd factors that played into it.
To your point on that last one, I think this is just a case where both of these things are true. But if you had to evaluate which one was more true, was it a really stellar game out of that Denver defense, or was it just an uncharacteristically bad game for the NFL's, at that time, top offense in Dallas?
Well, I think, you know, let's give Denver the credit. I mean, they went out and executed. And I think what's being lost in this is, you see it a lot in college football. You see it where a head coach gets fired. The next game, they come out and play the best game ever, you know. And it happened here with Denver. You know, they traded away their best player on defense. So they're sitting at 4-4. They're probably looking around like, what are we doing? Like, we're still playing. We're still in this fight. So I think they had a point to make with their own team, their own organization, their own fans. And so I give them a lot of credit for this. But I don't think the Cowboys played their best game. I think Tyron Smith is a really, really good player. I think he was the second most missed player in the NFL last week. Green Bay might have something to say about the first, but I just think it's totally different with him not out there. He's an outstanding guy at left tackle, and he was missed. And so there's a lot of things there, but, you know, got to give credit to the Broncos. And their head coach is giving himself credit. So let's give him credit, because he's certainly their head coach is going to have a hard time calling plays if he doesn't break his arm, patting himself on the back. But, you know, got to give him credit. They did it, and he's letting the world know that they did it.
Malik Turner. I just wanted to say that way because I think that's the first time I've ever said that name out loud in my entire life. Malik Turner, he went into this game for Dallas with one target on the season, winds up being the most targeted guy in that entire offense. He was targeted 7 times, had 5 catches. He scored both the touchdowns from Dak Prescott. Was that a one-off, or is this a guy who's actually fantasy viable now?
No, not fantasy viable, because he whatever he was on the depth chart, he's going to be one spot down. Michael Gallup comes back this week. He might have a hard time being active, if I'm being real honest. Now, the one thing that you didn't mention in the game is that I don't care what the NFL stats say, he blocked a punt. I mean, the punt was blocked. He went in there, it hit his shoulder, it ricocheted. We all saw what happened afterwards. He blocked the punt. But if the NFL would have actually rewarded that as a punt block on the stat sheet, he would have been the first player in the history of the NFL to block a punt, which he did, and catch 2 touchdowns in a game. Nobody's ever done that. It's weird that happens. Anybody catching 2 touchdowns in a game is probably not on the punt block team. So it was just the way the game kind of unfolded, and the fact all those injuries that we talked about at receiver, they weren't going to play. Now, Dak played when it was 30-0, but those other receivers were held out, and he caught a couple. He may not even be active this week. He's a good special teams player, but probably won't be a fancy guy with Michael Gallup now jumping back into the mix.
So who do we talk to at the league office to get this corrected so we can get him the credit that he deserves here, obviously?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the ruling is if the ball goes forward and is recovered forward, then it is not deemed as a block. It's just different rules. Because I know in a field goal, if you block a field goal and it rolls into the end zone, that's still considered a block. You get it in your fantasy points and all that. So I'm not sure why this isn't a block. And if it's not a block, then Denver maybe need to cut their punter for only punting a 2-yard punt. I mean, what's going on there? Because it clearly blocked it. I don't know why they're not calling it that. But, I'm a big stat geek and history. I love the first player ever. I love to write things like that. So I'm a little surprised that they're not calling it that way. That play changed the whole game, by the way. I think just you went out, you blocked the punt, you have the ball. You should have the ball in great field position. And then a rule that will probably come up in the NFL competition committee next year. It went against them.
We haven't seen Michael Gallup in quite a while. As you mentioned, he is due back here against Atlanta. What should we expect from him?
Well, I think they'll work him back into the mix. He's been out for a long time, like you said, and I think that he'll play a lot. I mean, deep ball is kind of his game. So, that's an aspect that I would see. They'll use him a lot, maybe for some deep throws. They'll work him in to the mix. Cedric Wilson's done a nice job this year as well, like replacing him. So they play a lot of guys. They play 4 or 5 in this last week, 6 receivers. So he'll get in the mix. It's probably not a great situation fantasy wise, just because they get a lot of different guys involved, and they don't really care about focusing on 1 or 2 guys there. But you could throw his name back in the mix.
Wasn't a great day against the Broncos for Ezekiel Elliott. That being said, statistically he was all right. I mean, he picked up 5 yards a carry. He seemed visibly slowed by a right knee injury. How much do you think that impacts him this next time out?
Well, that's one that we're going to have to watch. I mean, he did play. Now, it was 30-0, and he's out there playing, and he was 2-point conversion at the end and all that stuff. So, if it was that bad, I don't think he would have been out there. But he said after the game, it's something he's been dealing with for a while. I think he got re-aggravated in the game. It's just something to watch. I would imagine he plays. I'd be surprised if he doesn't, but something throughout the week that we'll be looking at.
Nick, Atlanta's posted a subpar offense, even worse defense to this point in the year. Now, normally, obviously, if we're talking about the Cowboys being as good as we've been saying over the last couple of months, this is very clearly a spot where they bounce back and win kind of going away. But what do you expect for this one?
I think it'll be a blowout for the Cowboys. I really do. And if it isn't, then then I'll be surprised like I was this one. I think it will be just because of the nature of the league. They got out hit, they got out hustled, they got outplayed, they got outclassed, they got out coached. Every person on that team in the coaching staff should know that. I mean, they got it handed to them, and if that doesn't, if that sits well, then there's a problem. So I think that there is no way Atlanta sneaks up on them this week. And with Dan Quinn being the defensive coordinator, Atlanta fired him last year in the middle of the season. Mm-hmm. He's got something for this game as well. I think the Cowboys are a better team. I think they've got more talent, and they're playing. This is a game that they will probably bounce back. So it smells like a game that they'll win and win convincingly. It's the NFL. It's hard to win by more than 10 points, but this is a game I think that they will.
Cowboys defense has a lot of fantasy points this year, and a lot of those picked up on takeaways, returns for touchdowns, that type of things. But as we know, this Dallas defense has its holes, has its issues. The run defense has been a little bit suspect. So is there a particular player you think on that Atlanta side, that offense, that is going to be especially problematic here?
Yeah, the tight end. The guy that everybody thought the Cowboys would want to draft if he fell to them, he didn't. Kyle Pitts is a generational type player, and I think that he's a guy that could give them problems. They don't have a lot of other guys, but they do have a former MVP quarterback, a veteran seen a lot in this league. But Denver didn't have a lot of those playmakers either. They didn't have a lot of guys you were worried about. And they got it done. And so, including from their quarterback. So this league, everybody can make plays. There's guys out there, but tight ends have always given the Cowboys a little bit of problems. Just because, do you put a linebacker on them? Do you put a safety on them? They're just mismatch problems. And Pitts is a mismatch nightmare. So, that would be a guy I think you have to look at.